Character. Rick brings it to life.
Whether your characters are space aliens, rabbits, moon rocks, pet insurance salespeople, they still have a necessary part of your screenplay. Creating believable, relatable, fully developed characters is easier said than done. However, there are some tricks of the trade that make it easier and less stressful. First, you need to discover whom you want in your script and to know that person or character as much about them as possible. Now, one way of doing that, and I heard a teacher suggest this, is to put your character into 50 different scenarios and see how they react, maneuver, fail, succeed in such an environment. Another exercise is to build a chart for your character that includes their name, their parents, family members, their favorite food, music, clothes, outings, vacations, colors, sports teams if they have one, their favorite TV shows, movies, friends, relatives, co-workers, their politics, their exes, their heartbreaks, their successes, their goals, their astrology chart even. Basically any information that you can think about that will help you define that character. In my book, 20 Things You Must Know to Write a Great Screenplay, I have an extensive list, a worksheet as you will, to help you create your character. And while putting together these parts is fun and necessary, bringing your character to life in your screenplay is a real challenge. Now, no matter who your character is or how big or small their role is, you should do everything to make that character relatable and believable and real. Sometimes it's those little roles that welcome bigger roles in the future. Every so often they help an up-and-coming actor become a shooting star lasting long into the cinematic universe. Let's take a couple of examples from television. Remember Max Klinger in MASH? He was supposed to be a one-episode character, and he ended up becoming one of the series' most unforgettable. Fonzie, probably the most iconic and memorable character to ever grace a TV screen, was not intended to be a major presence in the 1950s Happy Days world of the Cunningham family. Yeah, Hollywood is full of these minor, seemingly unimportant characters who would become legends just because a writer put in the extra time and thought into making them engaging and true. Now, in addition to creating your characters, it's also imperative that you understand their place and importance in your screenplay. One excellent way to do this is to read Chris Vogler's The Hero's Journey. Besides my two books, having Chris's book on your shelf and constantly using it is a boon to both character development and character placement in your script. What Chris's remarkable book does is describe in detail, but easily understood prose, Joseph Campbell's description and use of the hero's journey paradigm. It develops your various characters and shows how each fits into one of the 8 categories and 12 steps of the hero's journey. Now, another thing you must remember is that every time a character appears in a scene, we should learn a little more about that character. Keep in mind that there are different ways for a character to appear in a scene, even if they are not physically present. If a character is talked about, that's appearing in a scene. If there's something in the scene that represents the character, a book they wrote, a photograph they're in, seeing them on a TV or on a tape or a recording, if something that the character did or said previously that might affect the characters in the scene, that all counts as an appearance of your character in a scene, even if that character is not physically in the space of that scene. But be careful not to go overboard. If your character has a major role in the movie, the reader has about 100 or so pages to learn a lot about that person. If they're minor, 1 or 2 facets is enough. In this case, art does resemble real life. After all, if you first meet a person, you probably learn only a little about him or her. But once you develop a long-term relationship of any sort, each time you see, hear from them, talk to them, you learn a little more about them. This applies to screenplays as well. Only, of course, in screenplays, we have to do it fairly fast in a scene-to-scene rate. Finally, as to the script itself, it's critical to understand and know who is your protagonist and antagonist. Now, the definition of a cinematic protagonist and antagonist is different from the definition of a literary protagonist and antagonist. As you no doubt learned in literature or English class, the literary protagonist is the main character. The literary antagonist is a character or thing preventing the protagonist from achieving his or her goal. However, in film And in your screenplay, the protagonist is the character who goes through the biggest change. And it's not just the biggest change in the script, but the biggest change in that character's life. In Star Wars, who is it that changes the most? Who begins as an unsure kid wanting to go to the military academy, but is afraid to leave his aunt and uncle's home and fulfill his destiny? Easy question, easy answer. However, in Back to the Future, who begins as a first-class wuss? Who's afraid to stand up to his boss? Who's scared to send out his novel for fear it might be rejected? Who is barely holding a dysfunctional family together? You got it. It's the dad, George McFly. And where is he at the end of the story? Well, Biff works for him. George's first novel has been published, and his family is fully functional, firing on all cylinders. So if George McFly is a protagonist in Back to the Future, who's the antagonist? Well, remember, the cinematic antagonist is the character most responsible for the change in the protagonist. Who pushes, who cons, who forces George to ask Lorraine to the dance, who sets up the situation for George to finally stand up for himself. You got it, it's Marty. In the hero journeys paradigm, main characters like Luke Skywalker and Marty McFly are the heroes. But in the cinematic definition of protagonist and antagonist, each journey must be studied to determine which character takes on which role. This is not just some academic exercise. As we will learn later, knowing who is what also guides the major turning points in the script and determines how each act is structured and completed.